Okay, welcome guys to the second episode of the Playbook series for graphic design. In the last episode we covered what design was, the evolution of it and how we got to where we are, and how as a designer you can leverage the current trends in the design space to make yourself a key player in the industry. In today's episode, we're going to be going into the principles of design. Like I've said before and I'll continue to say, the reason why you can't cook good food is simply because you don't know how. The reason why you can't make good designs is simply because you don't know how. The moment you understand or you demystify the how, you'll be able to produce consistent results every single time. So, what design principles are technically the hows of creating good designs. What makes a good design a good design? What makes a bad design a bad design? So you can avoid those and then work on the things that make a good design a good design. So let's get straight into it. So first of all, what are design principles? Design principles are those theories, right? Those concepts that guide the way we create design. Now, there are a couple of design principles of which we're not going to be able to cover every single one of them in this video, but I'm going to make sure that I cover the ones that I feel are most important and most essential for your journey. So if you get these ones nailed down and you understand them, you are going to have better results moving forward. So the first design principle is balance. Balance in design is about creating visual stability, ensuring that one section of the work doesn't look or feel heavier than the other. Now, from this image we have on the screen right here, you can definitely tell that by science or by physics, this is not possible. We can't have just one block on one side and have 3 blocks on the other side, and somehow this scale is balanced. But in design, it's actually possible because it's not just in the number of elements in the design, but in how we are able to utilize the elements in that design to ensure that the design looks equal in respect to the proportion and distribution of space in that design. So now I'm going to show you a few examples so that you get a good enough understanding of what it is that I'm trying to say. So let's take this design for example. We can see that if you draw a line, right, on this section of the design, it's as though we've divided the design into two. We have one side that has a very good image showing the product, and then the other side of it showing the text. With this, we've been able to establish balance in the sense that even though we have just one element, that's the image on one side, and have like 3 different sections of text on the other side, we've still been able to create balance in the sense that the left side doesn't feel overweight in comparison to the right. Everything looks balanced in this design. Well, let's look at this second example. Now, if we draw a line this way on this design, we can also divide this design into 2 sections, the upper part and the lower part. And once we've been able to do that, you can see that the lower part doesn't look more clustered than the upper section. Therefore, we've been able to establish balance in the design. So many times I've seen a lot of people have maybe too many elements on one side and then disregarding the other side and leaving the space there. You're going to ensure that the distribution of space in your design is very, very proportional. The next principle of design is contrast. Contrast is simply creating visual separation. Now, you can achieve this visual separation through variation in color, size, shape, texture, and space. But fundamentally, what contrast is creating visual separation. We have 2 elements that are interacting with each other in this design. How do we present them in such a way that people can identify them apart from each other? So let's take a few examples to explain that. So looking at this example, we can see that we have a background, we have a chess piece, that's a pawn, we have the globe on top of it, and then we have the text on it. Now we've been able to create contrast. Just by looking at this, you can tell that these are 4 different elements interacting with each other: the background, the image, the globe, and then the text. One of the ways we're able to achieve this is one with the color. The background is of a very different color from the chess piece and that of the text, and even the globe, even though they share similar hues. Another way we're able to also achieve the principle of contrast is by size. They are not all of the same size. They are not all clustered together or smashed on top of each other, We allow them to stand out in their own unique way, ensuring that we can tell each element apart from the other. The next design principle is emphasis. Emphasis is about creating a focal point in design, using different methods to draw the attention of the viewer to a particular message. Like we've said before, design is visual communication. So you want to ensure that you are like a shepherd guiding the eyes of the viewer to what is most important in that design. You are consciously moving their line of sight to what exactly it is that you want them to see per time. We can take this photo manipulation piece I did a while back as an example. If you look at the text, the fighter down there, that's a very incorrect spelling of fighter, right? The H shouldn't be there. But making the H red, we're intentionally drawing your eyes to that text and at the same time laying emphasis on the fact that it is fight and then ha, not fighter. So these are very intentional things that you do in your design. You pick out whatever it is that you want to lay emphasis on, and in different unique ways, you just guide the eyes of the viewers to what is most important in that piece. So one of the ways we can do this is with color, like we did here. Sometimes we do that with size, with contrast, and many other techniques that we use to lay emphasis on elements in our design. The next principle of design is unity. Unity is the principle that brings all elements of design together. A design is made up of different elements. And what we do in unity is bringing them together in such a way that they look like they belong and nothing feels out of place. So we're creating a sense of harmony and ensuring the design communicates a singular message. So let's take this design for example. From here you can see that we have the model in the center, we have the text around, and we have some leaves in the background as well as the background color. Now all of these are different elements that we put together in the design, but we found a way to merge them together so well that they look like they belong and they are all communicating the exact same story. So you're looking at the leaf and you can already get the vibe of, oh, this is a amazing photography studio. You're looking at the text and you're already getting that feeling. You're looking at the model and you're also getting that feeling. Bringing all these design elements together in such a way that they all look like they belong one and they are telling the same message. The next design element on our list is rhythm. Rhythm in design is creating visual beats, that is, giving design a flow and a sense of movement and consistency. You can achieve this in a couple of ways with lines, shapes, or colors. Now let's take an example to further explain this concept. So taking this design, for example, we can see that just by looking at it, you kind of get the sense of a feeling that things are in motion in this design. And one of the ways we use to create this is not just the yellow lines in the background, is also in the direction in which the elements are facing. One of the ways we also establish this is by repetition. So having consistency in the alignment that we use to represent the elements in the design. The last and final principle of design I'll be talking about today is the principle of hierarchy. Hierarchy is the arrangement of elements to show their importance. It guides the viewer's eyes from the most important to the least, using size, color, contrast, or placement to make the message clear. Now, one of the ways I like to explain hierarchy is in a setting, in an organizational setting. We know that certain people are more important than others in that organization. Same thing goes with the design. Your task is to identify what is the most important information we're trying to pass across. Then you find a way to make that stand out, make that the number one thing in that design, and then you move to the next thing. What is the second most important thing? And then you make that the second most important, and then you just keep going down until you are done with everything in that design, right? So let's take an example to further explain that. Let's take this one for example. Right off the bat, the two things that will stand out to you are, first of all, the astronaut and then the studio community. And that statement, the studio community, is the most important in this entire design. So we ensure that one, it was the first element in the design, right? The collab studio community, first element in the design, as well as one of the biggest elements in the design. It had its own space. That as soon as you see it, your eyes goes first of all to that, and then your eyes will now move down to the astronaut, then move down to every Friday by 10 p.m., move down to the location, and then every other thing that will be featured in that event. So when you're coming up with designs, you have to think very intentionally about how you are presenting the information to ensure that people don't gloss over what is important. So for example, you're creating an ad for a brand. You want to always make sure that the product stands out the most. You don't want the price, the phone number, or any of all those other things to be the most important or the most outstanding thing. You want the product to take center stage, and then every other thing is a supporting cast. You can always find more resources online to help you better understand each of these principles because it's an entire world on its own. What we're trying to achieve with this playbook is to ensure that you're able to get condensed information that as soon as you're done with this playlist, you already have a good enough foundation to start learning how to use a software to create designs or an application or whatever. That's why we're not going into a full-on explanation, but this is actually very good enough. It's condensed and simple enough for you to understand, and then you can now begin to implement these principles in your design. We have a more detailed explanation on our Instagram. You can find posts related to that there if you need further explanation from this YouTube video that you are watching right now. So thank you so much for sticking around. In the next episode, we're going to be looking at what I refer to as design elements. And I always like to refer back to my cooking example. So let's say now you know how to cook. What are those things that you're going to use to make that dish? So that's what we're going to be talking about in the next episode. So you have a good enough understanding of the things we have at our disposal as designers to bring our creations to life. So thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and let us know in the comment section. See you in the next episode.